Yes.
Okay,
Audio is
great.
fine.
Okay, well, I'd like to introduce Kurt Wedgwood. He's at IBM. He's their blockchain leader, and he's currently based in Seattle, Washington. I've known him for at least 5 years now. I met him several in 2017 back at a distributed health conference, and we've been in touch ever since. I'm really excited to have him here. He's an adjunct professor at an MBA program at Seattle University. He's also chaired their Innovation and Entrepreneurship Board, and he's also serving as advisor to the U.S. Customs Border Patrol and many startups while he's been leading the IBM Blockchain Accelerator. And I'd like to introduce Kurt Wedgwood from IBM, and he'll give you a little more information about himself. Thanks, Kurt, for being here today.
Christine, it's such a pleasure to be here and such a great audience. Hats off. I want to start with just some hats off, right? Hats off to Gora, Ramesh, Christine, the volunteers that are behind this. And hats off, this is IEEE's, I guess, first, but it's, you have a much longer history. I also want to thank, everybody else who's investing time, speaking, and sharing points of view. I know yesterday I had the opportunity to come in and out and picked up quite a few things that I'll try and do a chat back to or a reference to as part of this discussion. And then third, I think the biggest acknowledgement is for the folks who are out there creating and doing, right? You're out there maybe just now starting, or you have launched a blockchain project and you're really seeking adoption, or you're already adopted and you're looking at expansion. And that's what I'd like to do today is meet you where you are in your journey and pull out some early warning signs, some wind into your sails. That I think is where I'd like to take this, because you are getting so much great content. Technically, you're getting great content from mandatory regulations. So for today, let's move to the preface, right? These are going to be my own comments, not expressed that of IBM. And this is in no way meant to be any investment advice. I think you can understand that. So with today, right, as I look at where you probably are, I want to go back to a moment in time, 2018, being at the Consumer Electronics Show in Vegas. So it's early January. There was a session in one of the rooms where there were 30 token companies that were presenting. And sitting there and evaluating each of the token opportunities that were being presented, it had already been vetted, right? It was down to 30. These were the 30 that were picked. What really struck me there was the utility that the token was providing. And inherent in that, and you'll hear this throughout, is what is the outcome that they're deriving? What's the value that they're creating? And of course, we took our dip there with tokens, but it didn't go away because there is value within the tokenization. And in fact, I'd argue that there are probably three main areas. There's tokenization, identity, and provenance that we've all anchored upon for our blockchain efforts. Now, marketplaces exist, right? And that's a place to move the solutions. But really just take a look back and think about the fits and starts that we've had. And I'd say our biggest opportunity is with adoption. So if we take a look at where we are, right, we're creating, we're adopting, we're expanding. Yes, you could add supporting, you could have all the way up with ideation, but if they were to boil it down to these three, let's just dive into each of these. I think create, we're probably at a 90-10 rule. And that 90 represents 90% of the inspiration, right? This is really vetting. Do we have something that's meaningful? Do we have a market that's ready? Do we have the opportunity to make a difference financially as well? Economics, are they driving it? And it's probably closer to 10%. You could argue it's 20. 10% that it is going to be the perspiration, right? That work that needs to happen. And in that create phase, you need just to
Una cosa bestial.
back there. In that 10%, you want to be building enough that is compelling them to say, I get the idea, I know where you're going, and. So that's what we want to see in create. So with that, and whether it was Scott yesterday or Jason, I believe it was, look at the use case, right? Number one, what's the outcome? Always, what's the outcome? Number two, what's the use case that we're going to deliver for that outcome? And when we're thinking about those blockchain efforts, we're looking at, is there friction between parties, right? Is there conflict? Is there, what I'll say down later is trust? Is there trust in the platform, or is there required trust? Take a look at visibility. Well, friction right now, I'm going to call out a case example that has already been identified, right? And it's out on the public space. Home Depot has been working on their financial accounts receivable. And you can find out, hey, in accounts receivable, there's dates, there's quantity, there's overage, there's shortage, there's damage, right? So inherently, there's going to be friction in there. What is it that a distributed ledger can do that can make the operations worry more about chasing numbers than it is about acting in real time? So friction is going to be definitely a pull. Visibility. Do we need visibility? And the number one area in visibility right now that the world is calling us to is the sustainability metrics, right? There's this huge idea that we are a more sustainable organization in the world. Well, the hand goes up and says, prove it, right? So how do you take those sustainability metrics, operationalize them, define them, and really put them into action so that you can prove that the product, that the service, that the organization is acting in the most sustainable fashion? And that is a big part of where we're moving forward with, is really that visibility. Move to that next one, timeliness. Timeliness of that data. How important is it to receive it near real time? Right? We've definitely operated in so much, and there were references yesterday to ERP, right? ERP, how real time is that when it's shared? How real time is that when it's still batched? How real time do we really need the information to be? You know, are we going to the edge? Are we taking the IoT sensors? Are we encoding? We're doing that with some of the genomes that projects that we're working on. Is we're measuring the capabilities for a tree or a plant and how they're growing in a moment, and then what they look like when they're harvested. So how important is real-time timeliness? I mentioned trust. Trust is, you could say it's one of the tenets that blockchain overcomes, right? For those of you who are relatively newer. But that trust in that data, if you scratch that a little bit further, this is about data quality. This is about assurance that there's privacy, there's known identity, and of course, there's the permissionless systems. But trust is when we really need that. How are we bringing that together for a blockchain use case? And then obviously more than one party. Now, more than one party gets kind of interesting in the 500 recent projects. There's probably about 10% that have started internal with cross division. You know, that's one that you just really have to scratch your head and say, why couldn't a centralized database, especially internal, handle this? But it goes back to a lot of the trust. In fact, we were working one where products were defined 8 different ways in 8 different regions around the world. So just that simple roll up of sales, of inventory levels, of sourcing, all provided an opportunity that said, hey, if we do have a shared ledger, even though it could have been centralized, what does that do? So about 10% maybe are less than one party to get you started for bigger connections down the road. All of us, I think, have our additional variables and use cases. Toss them in the chat. What else? Right? What else is really driving the use case variables? Move that then to what's going to make us successful. And that is about just what's the purpose? What's our why? What's our outcome? Whether it be launching new bank guarantees, whether it be the evolution of a marketplace like Coinbase, who's definitely being watched very critically right now as to volumes and transactions, right? What's the purpose? Then can you prove what you're doing, right? Can you prove to say, this is what the market's telling me, this is what we've delivered, let's walk through it, let's show it. And based on that feedback, just be ready to pivot. So purpose, prove it, and pivot. A great example of pivoting will have to do with a transportation company working with that was looking to hit a regulatory goal. And in the regulatory pursuit, what they found was what was needed was more of a marketplace of information. So they retrenched, said, hey, what does this marketplace look like? But it's that ability to quickly pivot and rethink what you're doing and what the marketplace needs. So engage, engage, engage. The second key to success here is the MVEPD. So the E being the ecosystem, right? What's the minimum viable, and then it's either the ecosystem, it's the project, it's the data. When we think of the ecosystem and we think about the leading providers, leading folks that are being, that could be impacted by your solution, pull them in early, right? Just really identify, get down to 3, 4. I like to do the rule of 3. 3 months, 3 participants, and 3 times the value of the initial investment. You can work on that from the enterprise space. You'll be in a very solid position for adoption. So that ecosystem becomes really critical. Case in point there, I'm going to go back to an IBM reference there with Food Trust. And out of the gate, it was at a conference in Cairns over in France. It was the Consumer Products Good Forum. And we brought those leaders in consumer products, in retail, whether it be Walmart on the same network as its top competitors, whether it be Dole on a network with its top competitors, right? How do you really bring in the ecosystem? In that situation, there were 10, right? A lot to manage right out of the gate. So I'm not suggesting just know your scale and know what you need to manage. The second one here, minimum viable project, right? What is it that we can do quickly, right? What can we scale down and say we can prove it just by working together? And that means you may want a project where there are folks from around the world that are helping you code, source. It may come out of a hackathon, right? But take advantage of that and really scale it down to a project that's doable. The third one is then the data. And this is where throw everything on chain versus we can hash and reference versus what exactly could be and should be on the initial pass of the chain of blockchain. Obviously, the data is going to have a cost over time. Yes, you can say it's relatively immaterial. But when we pull that back and we look at, we want clean data, we want trusted data, we want data that's easily traced. We are going to be storing the data. These are big implications. So we'd like to really reduce that data down to just the bare minimum to start. Again, it's about proving what our theory is. The third key to success here is look at the edges of scope. And what I mean by that, an example I would pick is we're looking at food. We may be able to move cans of peas, right? In the supply chain, we can track them. And in fact, We've got some great food discussions throughout these 4 days. He's relatively straightforward. What if it was something that was refrigerated? And we looked to prove it for refrigerated foods. And we looked for controls, really significant controls. And if something in a refrigerated trailer was at risk, and if we're able to identify that and act in that moment with something that may be going across Nevada in the heat of summer, and the reefer were to shut down and we were monitoring it, could we route it to Vegas and disperse versus showing up with it spoiled? If we were to work on that problem, P's become very easy. So that idea of push out to the edge of the problem, because if you address 1 to 2 standard deviations out, you can handle the rest. So what other keys to success would you add inside of your projects? So that's the create side. Now let's move to the adopt. The adopt, now we're going closer to a 60-40. And that 60-40 of you're still working on that inspiration, still that why. And that continues to be refined, but you've added a lot more into the technology, right? 40, you could say 50-50 here as well, but you've really honed and stayed true to your purpose, outcome, and why, while you've continued to develop your tech. So that adoption, it's going to require that you are creating value, right? And it's measurable. So for each of your participants, whether it be tier 1, tier 2, think about your network, lay it out in terms of direct and indirect, ancillary, first must-haves. Maybe we're going to bring in regulatory, maybe we're going to bring in insurance, maybe we're going to bring in banking. Think about each of them and really have empathized what's in it for them. That's going to add a lot of back to your purpose, your why, and it's going to help you monetize quickly. The other piece then that just goes hand in hand, it's a nice glove, is the incentive model, right? If we're creating value, what's the incentive for folks to join? There was one network that we were putting together where we had laid out kind of our tier 1, and I usually do it in a circle. And you're going to list all of your possible participants, and then you're going to bold 3 to 4 that are absolutely critical by definition of stakeholders. Then you're going to list all the companies that could be possible, and you're going to pick 1 to 2 of those. But in one of these, we were laying these out, and we're like, there's just really no value that's being created. How are we, but yet we need their data. How are we going to inspire them to be a part of the community? And frankly, in this situation, it said, as we monetize the entire network, for them to come back, they're going to do a drawback from the network, right? And that's an economic decision. So you may go as extreme to say, we'd like to pay you to play. So don't rule out. Look, be really intentional with knowing the value being created and thinking about the incentive model, because as parts of that network aren't inspired to join, it's diminishing the return of the overall network. Second one here, the third one is governance, and a lot of that has been discussed here over at least on day 1. Governance, who's going to be a part of it? What data are we going to provide? Who can see what information? What are security policies? Also use this to take a look at the monetization, right? There are many different monetization models. It could be subscription. It could be transaction-based. It could be a pooled founder-led model, right? There are lots of decisions that you'll make around the governance model. I think the fourth one here is, to have strong adoption, you need to have a great support model. So anytime there are questions whether it be functionally, directional, technical, right? Use that as a moment to really seed a positive feeling about what you're creating. So use that support as a differentiator. That will increase stickiness, which will then increase the ability for anybody on that network who's considering that network to be pulled in. Finally, when they are on affirmation, right? They made this choice, they're a part of it. How are you staying with them? How are you giving them the response back that is pulling them in and making them feel this is the right decision, whether it be from a technology, something that one of the technology providers are doing, or whether it be co-writing something for the Wall Street Journal or a joint blog, but really keep them engaged. This is how we start with adoption. There's a reference here, I think that we all are very familiar with. First adoption of Bitcoin, right, was pizza. Now, was there a lot of value in Bitcoin at the beginning? No, it was less than pennies, right? And they knew that. And that request for pizza took 2 weeks. Or it took it was about 7 days before that message was picked up to deliver me a pizza. Once it was picked up, does that mean now everybody is trading Bitcoin for pizza or for products? No, I think less than 10% of Bitcoin right now is in circulation at the transaction level. Somebody should fact check that and post it in. But we're a long way from adoption, from even what we say is just the investment of Bitcoin versus the critical use. I think tokens are taking us that direction. Final one I want to hit here, and we'll open it up here in less than 5 minutes for additional questions, is expand. Now, I hope that a lot of you have already said, hey, we've launched, we are in the middle of our adoption, and we're looking to expand. This is where it's much more about building out the capabilities, less about inspiration, because if it's inspiration, you need to rethink, are we creating something new? So you may go back through the loop. So when we're expanding, right, intentional, be very mindful here. What's the functional value? You can expand on functional value. And that could be, extended use cases or lines of business. I'm going to steal a page again from the Transparent Supplier IBM Food Trust, where that was initially set up for track and trace and food safety. Within a year, the functional value moved to where's my inventory? What's my freshness look like? What customer interaction can I participate in? So all of these were still with the same data. It was just an extension of the functionality that the platform has brought. It continues to get better with onboarding, with data quality work queues, right? Continue to expand and function. So you could expand and function with the same participants. You could add new participants. You could go fill in that market, and you could go to a new market, right? So be thinking about what's my new participant. All right, you're doing that early in the adoption. You're doing all the way in you're laying out your roadmap, but balance that, right? New participants versus new functional value. The other part is you may want to be adding in new data, right? What is the data that's being asked for my current providers that we've just been hesitant to put up, right? One of those has been very sensitive, has been pricing. Pricing information has always been one. And at what point do you move to pricing? Second is when do you move from maybe a business function to the movement of money, right? Do you start to include a lot of what would traditionally be on an EDI network, right? Do you start to include some of those EDI banks? Third one is when we're expanding, and this was highlighted yesterday as well. we're moving now that we have the transactions, we have the data, but let's amplify the learning. Let's apply AI or ML. Let's stretch and pull data from IoT sensors, whether that be about the automobiles, whether it be about the way we're driving, whether it be about the way we're growing potentially food, right? Look for embedding those capabilities and give new insight, make that network even more and more valuable as you continue to expand. And finally, I think there's that point that says there's integration. Our network is not necessarily a standalone. We're not going to have one network that rules the world, right? Look at that integration. What network are you most like? Or what network is your current network looking for you to expand to? And could it be done best through an integration or an interoperability type play? So all those are additional areas for expansion. Wrapping up here, right? The action that I'd like to know that's landing is, where are you in your journey? And what do you have to be thinking about next? What do you need to be executing very well right now? Because there's not a next if you're not executing well now. Ask for help. There are so many great people just in this conference that the team has brought together. Thank you again, IEEE, right? That the team has brought together. They're all, this is what it totally inspired me back in 2016 to come from a leave of absence and stay with it, was because of all of you. It's the community. It's a fantastic, open, sharing community. So asking for help is just kind of going next door to the neighbor and saying, hey, do you have any eggs I could borrow? Right. And then the third is sharing your learnings, right? And I know that there's one chat comment in here, but even as this inspired additional thoughts, things that you've learned, right? Just continue to just share what you've done and how you've learned. With that, open it up. What landed and what questions did it prompt? Thank you. All right, I do see one.
All right.
I see one question out of the gate.
Yeah. First of all, thank you very much, Kurt, for that excellent presentation. Inspiring, absolutely phenomenal. So kudos to you. Thank you.
Thank you. It was a different cut, right? Than,
yes. No, perfect. It's a perfect cut.
Right. I want to add some seasoning to. You've got so much great content.
Right.
This one wants to inspire to think a little different. Thank you, Cora.
So
Yeah,
do you want to? Sorry, go ahead, Chris.
Oh,
go ahead.
no, sorry, you go ahead. I was just checking.
All right. Yeah. Do you want to talk a little bit about the money part of it? Because at the end of it, you need funding, you need, the food on the table. You're an entrepreneur, So if you can just reflect on that.
All right. So a model I would suggest would be just go to the whiteboard, write down 3 things. Write down revenue, write down cost, and write down risk. And then I take revenue and I would blow out revenue. And I would say, what is this network going to do to deliver these participants more revenue? And if so, what's the metric and how much, right? It could be growing, it could be brand new product introduction, totally new product. It could be new customers. It could be growth with existing customers, right? What is it that we're inventing and how is that impacting the revenue? The second, with cost. How are we reducing costs in the network? Is it efficiencies? Is it taking steps out? Is it elimination of participants? Really work on that cost equation. And now between those two, go even one further back and say, what risks to a company are we reducing? It could be regulatory, it could be compliance. It could be exposure to unsustainable practices, right? Whether it be mining for certain materials. But take that and translate that to, with my first 3 participants, how much can I save them in the first 3 months? How much can I make them? What's the value of this risk reduction? Start to think about the monetization model and ask for money at the beginning. I'm not saying run to a VC and say, I've got this great idea and go there. Try and use the grassroots and see if you can fund this yourself through making money for those first participants.
Thank you. Excellent. Chris, all yours.
Okay, well, thank you, Kurt. Are there any other questions in the audience that we have?
I'm going to hit Ramesh. Thanks for your call out. It was directly to me. Sorry. Ramesh had asked which industries are leading in the blockchain adoption space.
Okay.
So I want to answer with 2 things, and I'd love the people's perspective. I want to say which countries or geos are leading as well. And I'd love people to just kind of say, hey, it's Europe, it's Asia, it's Americas. I'd love the poll on that one.
Kurt, sorry to interrupt. Do you want to stop sharing? That way you'll be on the middle of the screen.
Oh, yeah. Thank you.
You do a stop share, basically.
Yeah, of course I did a resume.
Mouse at the bottom.
So one, I would totally ask, let's think geography wise, right? Which one of the industries, not industries, which one of the geos? And I've watched over the years, Asia come up, Europe come up, US kind of more stay constant. So I'm quite curious to everybody's opinion there. But the other one that was direct to Ramesh's question, there is industry-wise, I'd say there's a function. Supply chain really is run very fast, as has finance, right? Because it obviously the first use case was around finance. You had banks feeling threatened, and insurance saying, is there a new way to do things? So finance and insurance are up there. I would say with the consumer type products and industrial products, you've seen that. Healthcare has moved. I think part of what we all went through we're still going through, right? With COVID has opened up even more. Now, are we yet to see the payer provider friction completely resolved yet? No, right? But they're an insurer. So I think that there's a number of industries, government and land, I think, as we start to take a look at private properties. Mexico is out of the gate very early with registering all title lands, but that was in reference to preventing fraud and bad actors. So I hope that gives you some idea there, Ramesh. John asked, hey, when you say adopt 60/40, 60 is the ideation, it's the soft part of the equation. 40 is usually the build, right? How much are we spending on positioning, messaging, still staying focused to our why, out there attracting versus building? And so I think you're still tipping pretty heavily in that adopt phase, in really refining that messaging, driving the value, knowing who you are. You're working a lot still on that functional side. Thank you, Ramesh. And Alex with a shout out here. Thanks for posting his own.
And Kurt, if you would like others to interact with you offline, tell them how they can do that, whether it's Twitter, whether it is LinkedIn, whether it is.
LinkedIn is best, and that information was absolutely as part of the program and the profiles.
Okay.
Thank you. I mean, and this platform's been great, Gaurav. This is just, I know you're not about feedback, but just the way you guys have just run this, it's been clockwork, it's been easy, and it's been interactive. Fantastic.
Oh, great. And
Yeah,
Kurt, I
thank
think
you.
you also added some documents in the community area in Hoover. I think you had loaded a few things the other day, so if maybe wants to check out in the community boards, that'll be great.
Perfect. Yeah.
Adoption is for all of us. Keep pushing the needle, keep doing what you're doing. Let's continue to expand together in new and meaningful ways.
Yeah, and I love your point about sharing. I mean, the point which I always make is earn, learn, and have fun. You know, you got to have fun. You got to learn every time, and yeah, sharing is the best way to learn. So thank you for that. All right, Chris, I think we can wrap this up.
Okay,
thank you.
well, thank you very much, Kurt. Good job. Yeah, we appreciate your time.
All right, folks, with that, we bring an end to this segment. There is special chat, mode of networking. So it's a different link. It's not Zoom. It will take you out of Zoom. You'll have to close Zoom. But go to special chat. Let's network there, informal network. And we come back at 9 a.m. Pacific in 25 minutes. There are 3 multiple tracks going on from here onward. All right. And with that, we end the session. Thank you.
Recording has stopped.